Hey, this is Adam Stab. You're at Ground 3 Radio, rocking with Mike on the mic.
Yo, what it do, family? It's your favorite host, Mike on the mic from the Vibe Perspective Podcast. Tapped on my guys at Ground 3 Radio, DJ OK. Man, we are back again for another Vibe Style Wednesday and another series of interviews. And shout out to each and every one of my listeners tonight. Man, make sure you take the time to like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video. We work super hard on this content. We got so many things in the tuck. Man, we got the newest beer pong series coming up soon this weekend. Also, shout out to Sean Ski, our last interview. Incredible, just an incredible story, an incredible person. Absolutely love telling that, and y'all gave me a lot of feedback on that. That was y'all loved it, so we're gonna give you more good content in that regard. So man, we working hard. The whole team is working super hard. Make sure you call in at 443-377-1872. Again, that number is 443-377-1872. Man, I want to get right into this one because this is we got a super special guest in the building, man. Somebody I've been watching their work for a long time, and we've been trying to get this to happen, and we had to get the schedules together, and we had to do the whole coordination dance, man. But if you know this guy, man, an artist, man, a creative thinker, man, one of our legends in the city. You can call him a painter, you can call him whatever you'd like, but he is an incredible artist overall, man. The Billie Holiday Project, forget this, Liberation Arts artist in residence, man, and truly the longest active graffiti writer in the city of Baltimore. We got Adam Stab in the building. What up, Adam?
Peace, Mike. Thanks for having me. Caught me on the late end of a long day at the spray paint can. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm going to try and keep some in the tank for you. And
absolutely.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely, man. I just appreciate you. Like you said, you did a pretty extensive bit of work today, and I know how much that can take a toll on you. So I'm just glad that you're able to still be here, and then just give us the time, man. This is a work in progress that we've been trying to coordinate correctly, and we finally made it happen. And without further ado, I just want to get right into it. The people I respect the most that's sitting in front of me, I always want to start at the beginning. I want to go to the beginning of the story and kind of walk our way up all the way to kind of paint the picture, if you will, no pun intended, of the life of the person I'm sitting in front of. So, got to start early. Now, you're born in Buffalo, New York.
Yep.
And you lived in Southern Illinois for a little bit, and then you spent some years in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
Your mom had moved to Baltimore to work for Hopkins, as I think a neuroscientist, and she was getting her doctorate in North Central Florida previously. But then you were pretty hyped to move to Baltimore, I know, because you already had sort of this urban kind of influence, energy with skateboarding, and especially in Florida. And by the way, shout out to Rodney Mullen, man, because I think you skated the same park that he came up in.
Yeah.
And I want to start there of early life, pre-Baltimore, and kind of skateboarding and that influence it had on you as a kid.
Yeah, for sure. I was super involved in skating before I was a writer. And oddly enough, the timing is cool because I was just in Gainesville for the first time really as an adult, only about a week and a half ago, and it was a really, really great experience to step back into that realm that I spent so many of those formative years between was I 10 and 13 years old.
Yeah.
I was there, and very different time in our country. Really different time in our country, different time in the freedom that a child has. So my reverence for, I guess that space and that freedom that I had during that time, which my regard for how special it was changed when I got here. I'm not going to say that my execution really changed because it had set in, and I had to stay with my ways. But when I moved to the first real city I had lived in ever, by comparison to these other small towns, I realized the length of control that most parents had to go through to take care of their kids in a city environment versus living in the country, where definitely. You could just kind of run wild a little bit more, and still get into stuff, but not nearly as much trouble as you could here.
Sure.
So Gainesville, skating, coming up at the now defunct skate park there called Sensation Basin was super early and formative in kind of my years of exposure, I would say. While my mom was studying, I had a lot of time to myself on my mongoose and would like wreak havoc around town. Just you know, getting into this, getting into that. I had a couple of like really cool, unplanned, you know, intended babysitter / caretakers who were just like other undergrad dudes, younger than my mom, but that lived in our same apartment complex. Who I would hang out with. You know, one guy's name was Moose. The other dude's name was Fang. Believe it or not, like you can't make this shit up. But both great dudes. Total stoners. Moose was into model rocketry and would take us out shooting rockets off, you know, into no place. And Fang turned me on to a lot of rad shit. I would knock on his door a lot and just sit in his bed while he was doing homework and listen to Pink Floyd and read the X-Men. You know, he turned me on to John Byrne, you know, while he was drawing the X-Men and kind of redefining Wolverine as a character that y'all's generation would come to know him as like the modern 100%. Superman, you know. And I was there at 11 years old, like sitting on this dude's bed, this college kid, you know, bed. And, so he turned me on to rad shit, turned me on to Devo. While I was in Gainesville here recently, I got a rad like gator wearing a Devo hat tattoo to commemorate the memory of growing up there and some shit, because I saw them at a free concert at UF, I think in 1980. When they came through on the Freedom of Choice tour. And it was one of my first concerts away from my mom. You know, and at 10, that's still a right age to be away from your mom doing anything, you know. But
anything.
She didn't even know anything about this band, you know, and I was already really into them, you know, and found out they were doing this free concert. So I rode the goose up and, like, you know, I clearly remember just leaning it against the tree, you know, locked. You know, these were, like I said, these are different days, you know, and so Gainesville was very provisional to this sort of, you know, Midwestern leftover residual Tom Sawyer-esque spirit that I showed up here with, which was not very, again, endeared to my initial friendship group in East Baltimore, who were only allowed to but go so far. Or it was like, yo, you gotta be kidding me. We're not going to Lexington Market. I'm like, why am I not? You know, like, my parents find out I took the bus that far, it's on. They'll never let me talk to you again. You know, and there were concepts I had to like come to understand with regard to like boundaries that people live by here that were very different, you know, that I never had.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so interesting you mentioned that, because there was, in my research, there was this sort of how can I put it? This traversing the land, sort of like mindset you had as a kid. You wanted to be out. You wanted to move around and kind of catch the landscape, just understand what the lay of the land is. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, especially in that time, we're talking about like early 80s, like in that kind of era. Like, kids were outside. Like, kids were, like, traveling. They were going places.
Baltimore at that time was still very outside. Yeah, like, exactly. I got to say, like, just for the reason of it being said, for those who know the landscape now, I mean, it's not that kids aren't outside.
Right.
They aren't, how do I say this in the right, like, there was still a place in the outdoor environment that was fit for kids, and that space is now, as you know, it's like dwindled down to like a very unsafe, like
100%,
not good for kids zone.
They shouldn't be there.
Right. And so when I showed up, there was still some space in the urban environment for the youth. Right. Lots of space, like cool, you know, things. Not just like in the hood, but just in the city in general.
Right.
My generation. When I first got here, a part of the uniqueness of growing up, right, from like 83 to, again, like, you know, like when things really started to change after, you know, the late 80s and the era of crack and like, you know, just like how this place really, when it, you know, when they closed all steel mills and the real white flight set in and the working class just got demolished, you know, I was kind of here for that. I got here just in time for all of the rug to get swept out of the rest of the foundation Baltimore had. Not that we know that systemization hadn't happened for a long time, but
for sure.
So I saw the tail end of some of them still really, the camaraderie we knew between neighborhoods back then when I was in high school was still at a high schooler's level of beginning to participate in your city's structure and urban environment between the high schools, the interplay and the interchange, And then when the education, this one fell all the way out, and this one fell all the way out, they could no longer interface between it. Or you had no respect. I was like, oh, I go to Northern, or I'm at City, And the way you all knew, and then Andorra had certain places in the city where you congregated. Like, for example, the Inner Harbor.
Yes, yeah.
During its heyday and era of, like...
What a time, yeah.
all kind of young people being able to, like, be safe down there. Yep. Get our first jobs, most of us, like, I don't know, get that sense of like, oh, I'm in the working world a little bit, and learn to carry your ass in public, learn to grow up, where there was other adults around, where you were expected to behave with a certain demeanor of like, oh, I want to be able to be here, not. So let me pay attention to how it works in the real world. Like, kids don't have that framework.
100%, yeah.
To like plug into early, like we had before the street lights went down. We could still, between school getting off and having to be home, we could get some more growing up done. In the urban environment that wasn't in school. And I was like, fuck, for a while I went to school for the arts, but we didn't get out of school till 4:10.
Right, yeah. And I'll get into that too. I mean, and that's the thing. I do want to give some context of like, you moved to Baltimore at 83, you're like 13. And you briefly mentioned about writing, and you started writing at 14 and 84. I think actually, just a small bit of information also. I think at 15 was the first time you got like arrested for writing, but like you were innocent.
It was over some bullshit.
I'll feel free to talk about that, but I feel like
careful what y'all do out there. Like it's still, and a lot of writers will abide by this. The first time I got arrested was just for doing a tag in dust. It was like over literally like doing a tag in some dust on a building that was under construction. Unbeknownst to myself, I did it in front of a couple of beat cops. And, I think one of my friends literally gave me the yo, as I'm halfway through, and I glanced over and realized, but was like, fuck him, yo, I'm not doing anything. This is dirt. Fuck the man, I'm not doing nothing. But they straight up called me over, demanded a field report, and when I denied them any information at all, I was like, nah, it's not happening. I'm not giving you anything for anything. They, were quick to grab me up right in front of my peoples, made sure they spooked me and my friends pretty bad, like grabbed me up, threw me against the wall before I really knew what was happening, and cuffed me up. But, it was a quick lesson into like, oh, shit, all right, Again, at that time, they weren't playing with any of that shit because it was still a very new, what do they call it? Crime of just like the public really had they had an edge on it. Even the public was gripey about it. It wasn't one of these things that was just kind of going under the bridge based on all the other things that we really got bigger fish to fry.
Way bigger,
At that time, that kind of like sense of intrusion was a lot. And it was a righteous collar for any cop. Like they bring you in like, you got one of those little buggers. So a very different day than we're living through right now.
But I did want to mention that because, there's a lot of interconnecting kind of concepts that like pop up in your story that I think kind of weave the entire thing together towards like even into adulthood. And, I mentioned sort of this, being innocent, right? Like there's like this common thread of like innocence that relates to like just being, a kid, at that time. And I think this sort of youth, this feel of youth within graffiti has such like a really big like sort of foundational element to like the art itself. Like I think, first of all, I talked about being solo dolo, talked about sort of traversing the land and kind of being independent and kind of like, first of all, being a kid, trying to find your way in the city of Baltimore, not having any friends, kind of also being on the outskirts because you're the new guy, and then having to try to fit in somewhere. And then through your independence and then through your traveling and sort of understanding the lay of the land, you found graffiti through that independence and found the love for graffiti. And then through that graffiti love, you found other friends. You found people, and there's like this very interesting like just sort of connectivity through all of it, you know. And I think, you know, we talked about, you know, when you first moved, you moved to Hollandtown, which also kind of puts in perspective, like for the audience, I always like to do this to like kind of put a time and place and a date on like people's mindset of how the story starts. And being in Hollandtown, you know, and additionally, you joined a small group of guys, you know, who you ended up connecting with, you know, on like the Lower East Side of that area, like, and we talked about blue collar working class people. I also have to mention this too. There was, you know, I've been doing a lot of research, not just for your story, but like the things that surround your story, especially graffiti. And it's so funny. The first person I've ever saw a note or some sort of information about whoever started graffiti in Baltimore was a black man by the name who wrote Beau, Beau. And he worked in like this, you know, factory, you know, in the
Bethlehem,
right? Yeah, in Bethlehem still, right? The thought was because he was writing with one of the pens you would use to mark up steel, that tag would signify that this man has access to these pens, which means that you most likely worked at Bethlehem still, which a lot of people in the city did.
You'd think that any of us would have been, you know, a little sharper in the tool shed than we were to have taken as long as it did for us to figure that out, but none of us ever did.
Yeah.
I was one of like two writers that ever met Guy, and that was a crazy fun story with regard to meeting him, because
please tell it.
It really wouldn't have happened, because if it had not been for my willingness to get over like the strict relationship that I had already formed with a real good friend of mine who was a writer. He wrote Zero and Matter, were his tags back in the day, like infamous bus bomber, really good like quick style hand, and infamous practical joker, like just one of them cut ups. Like he was the guy, best of the bunch at like prank phone calls, like you couldn't beat him, you know, like he was the guy.
Yeah.
So one day we're all like after schooling on Baltimore, just off of, or I guess at the corner of St. Paul there at the McDonald's, which has been there that long.
Yeah,
you know?
forever.
So
yeah.
it wasn't our usual haunt, you know, like, but for some reason we were all the way down south, and we're crowding up at the Mickey D's and taking turns flipping bus passes, which we would do back then with somebody just who had a pass. With that many buses going by outside, we would just hang out while we were having French fries, and somebody would go on and off the buses, just writing on shit, you know, just for the sake of busting tags while we were downtown for the day before going home. Yeah. And so he's in the middle of fucking bus bombing, and we're in the Mickey D's, and he comes flying in the Mickey D's. He's like, yo, I just met Beau. I'm on the bus, and this old man stopped me in the middle of the tag, and he says he's Beau. Like, you know, like, man, he's on the corner. And we all look at each other like, are you going to jump up and get him running down the street? Or like, I'm like, no, I'm not taking the bait, Zero.
Right.
Like, it ain't happening, man. You didn't just meet Beau.
There's no way.
And he's like, I did, you know, like it's like the consummate boy that cried wolf. Consummate. And I'm like, man. He's like, he's gonna get on the bus. He's gonna get his transfer. We're gonna miss him.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, man, you're really gonna get me on this. He's like, I promise you. You know, it's like
the one classic. Time I need you to believe me.
Next thing I know, here's me flying down the street. And I was like, God damn it, boy! If you stop running and start laughing, I'm never gonna forgive you.
Yeah.
So I just knew at any minute it was just gonna be a joke. But sure enough, you know, it's funny. Other things have come around like that in the graffiti world. But we met. Talked to him a minute before he jumped on his transfer bus. Was for sure enough to deal him. I was smart enough to get him to do me a tag. I still have it to this day. He worked at Beth his whole life. He started there. It was his only job in life. Worked there his whole life. That's how jobs used to be.
Yeah.
And he was a steel marker. He always had one of those pens on him. It wasn't long. It wasn't long many years, but not crazy many years after that I actually saw some sheets he marked in the street because it was his handwriting.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Which I would never forget or mistake, because we grew up on that shit. Yeah. And again, the wonder until we met him as to like, what is that shit you use?
Yeah.
And until he told us himself, like personally, I never knew.
Yeah.
Because that was like out of our wheelhouse, you know. And now it's a common tool.
Yeah.
All the kids use it, you know, because of that crossover. So,
man, what a legend. What a pioneer in the space, man.
Yeah.
Man. Bo, man, big shout out to Bo. Wherever his spirit lives on to this day. Shout out to Bo, man.
You know, interesting backstory to that. Many, like fast forward many years ahead, or like, you know, like, yeah, is that, I guess what you say, like, which is, it was ahead, but still back from now.
Yeah.
So it's confusing.
Timeline,
yeah, especially on my brain. But I became friends with a documentarian, videographer, artist named Bill Daniel, who was from the Bay Area.
Okay.
And he did a really conducive documentary, which you should check out if you haven't seen it or heard of it. It's called Who is Bozo Texino? And it is, it was originally, I think, started as a graduate thesis sort of film maybe, but like really became this intense labor of love on his part, coming from the community that he was already connected to, whereby which through black and white film media of different types, he goes into a documentative dialogue about the history of scribing art on the boxcars out in the freight yards, which has been sort of a parallel universe to the style writing movement that was born in the urban environment, where the scribing movement was born of, you know, Depression era, and I even pre, you know, on the rails with, you know, with the transient hobo traveling set, you know, of which I've literally I have blood relatives that were in on that long before I was even here as well, that I came to find out more about the way they lived after the fact. But Bill's documentary was so informative and taught him so much that when I met him when he was out playing that show on the road, he got my number from another graffiti writer friend, and such as the web, and I hooked him up with a place to show this movie, and it was mainly writers that came out of interest, but that's what he was out to do, was just show this to as many people as he could after he had made it. And we're having breakfast the next day, and I'm telling him about the history of Baltimore graffiti, and we go through Bo. Yeah. And this is how sharp he is with regard to his reference in reflection to the immediacy of his own experience. And he was like, wait a second, you know, if you're telling me Bo is like you guys' first guy, and there was no other guy for him to look at, even if he was a city dude. Yeah. So where was he seeing graffiti? He was probably seeing it on the freights that they were loading out of Bethlehem Steel, don't you think? And he was marking with the same thing that these other writers were marking with in reaction. And Bo's tag looks more like a moniker because it's got this little motion thing to it, not much. Just a little chugging along, like little, his B was just sort of chugging along. And everything else was very simple, which is a lot of the way monikers are. They're not real artsy. Yeah. It's hobo shit. Yeah. It's just a Kilroy, I was here. Yeah. With enough style that you remember it. But he got his inspiration from the hobo art. Yeah. You know, so...
My brain
again, like I didn't. That was one of the things that it took somebody who was deeply studied in that to come through and be like, you know, look, you're a dude who set off kind of the writing thing because he was all city anyway. He started writing on some other shit. Yeah, you know, mainly steel shit. Yeah. That would last. He got his inspiration from the hobos. Which then, you know, all these years later, the graph kids love the hobos.
They love
like they love. They're like, oh, you guys are even cooler than we are cool. You know, we're the coolest. They love them some hobo art. Boy.
No, that. I'm a history guy. Like that is stuff that I love to hear. Now, knowing a person like me, after I leave here, I'm gonna be up till like 3 a.m. looking this up. Seriously, I'm gonna really be locked in.
Bill's movie you will love. Oh, it's so informative and it's so grainy and just it's just good. It's just a great documentary.
Yeah, I am locked in. Everyone who's watching, lock into. Absolutely, shout
out Bill Daniel.
Man, he it sounds like he did a lot of great work. So I mean, I do want to wrap sort of back in. I mean, we talked about the early life and just getting to Baltimore. You went to Herring Run as well. I want to mention that in grade school. And then soon after, you got into the Twigs after school program at Baltimore School of the Arts, where you talked about you ended up being at Baltimore School of the Arts. And, but around this era, guys you were looking up to, and just to go back to this sort of youth aspect, this kind of youth theme, guys you were looking up to were like only a year, maybe 2 years older than you at the time.
The majority of the graffiti writers who were up and pronounced like in... And again, it was like only a small area of graffiti, the area of Baltimore that had graffiti in it. It was kind of like around here.
Right, yeah. Yep.
In the threshold of the Maryland Institute, in the wake of like where the students themselves would be either walking or busing and stuff, was where you mainly saw the strength of it. There were little outcrops under bridges and stuff like that in Mount Washington, where some of the kids lived, and they would creep away to the little stoner spots and decorate them. Classic places
St.
they had
Paul,
probably grown up with that were already kind of AC/DC'd out or whatever before this movement started, So most of what I came up on was like, say, if I was, got here junior high age, like was into and was already writing, by ninth grade. Some of these guys were people who had like already decided they were going to quit art school. And I mean art college, not art high school. So they were a little older. Some of them,
Okay.
like they were that next clip above. And so my generation of high schoolers that started writing, because it was me. Then there was a lot of us. Hip hop broke.
Right.
That was that moment. I was here. I got here just before hip hop broke. Like as it was cracking open. I showed up in a real city. It's time to like have a Puma sweatsuit and shit.
Fly.
It was quite a moment. And then it got dangerous. It was
Right,
fun for a hot secchi. And then they made it so treacherous around here.
So I've heard.
So treacherous. That, thank God, a part of like, again, like the saving grace, huge saving grace. And in ways, especially for so many of the people that it literally saved, of the transference of the scenes of which that I came up in, was the punk rock scene.
Yes.
And that difference.
That's exactly where I was going to go.
Any of that treacherous nature into a much more, again, like safe haven, socio-politically astute scene that was real different than all that, what was about to happen in the community at large.
100%, Yeah, and I mean, I did. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I definitely want to talk about. So, in terms of, I was mentioning the youth aspect to it, of like people who are not so much older than you, who like you were kind of inspired by in terms of the writing, but like if you like sort of juxtapose that to today, where it's like the vast majority of like the scene is like older people, like way older, and it's like if you just kind of compare that to where. In the early origins, like 70s, 80s, it was like a very youthful scene. Like it was mostly just kids there. And it was like the people who were really like the most prolific ones we know now, we see pictures of them, they're like 11, on the, or 12 on, subways or, wherever, little corridors or whatever. But additionally, I was going to mention sort of this... for a long time, coming up, one of my first graffiti pieces I've ever seen was my cousin DJ Twisted. He actually has his piece on the wall right now, and I'm like maybe 7 or 8, and he's a DJ. So like I always attributed like graffiti to hip hop, which it is, regarded as one of the elements of hip hop. But to be completely fair, like graffiti was very punk before it was hip hop. And in a lot of ways, that kind of talks about your story of like the places you frequented. You talk about like the Punk Rock Hall or like Jules Place, and there's a lot of these places that influenced your story early on that were very punk and that you were exposed to very early on before hip hop even hit. And also there was another thing that I heard you say in a previous interview of like you saw hip hop start. And then you kind of just saw it like stop. And what did you mean by that in terms of like, was it the era like where it kind of hit really hard, and then it kind of just stopped being that thing that we regarded it as in terms of hip hop in that time?
I mean, I think, here we go. I mean, you don't want to go get a hate mail because.
No, I love
it. But, well, you got, people sensitive about that topic. That's for sure. I think there's ways to talk about what we culturally reference as hip hop in different lights, right? Let me say that first, because I think I don't want to pigeonhole myself into something I said or how I may say it in differentiation this time.
Fair, yeah.
But in an attempt to explain what I meant by that or where I stand with regard to that as a concept that I think is just one of these things that we as people who appreciate culture should toss out and ping pong around more, just as a concept.
Sure.
I only say it because I'm not. Look, I didn't come up with I was sort of. I've had and I have. I have had and I have.
Yeah.
Mentors extraordinaire in the hip hop genre. It wouldn't exist without my mans.
Right.
So I ain't worried about what the fuck the world thinks because my mentors, some of them, built the fucking house, right?
Yeah.
So in graffiti, in DJing, I can reach out and touch motherfuckers who are the architects, right? And
Absolutely.
have had conversations and dialogue with people who, bring to it that level of not just I was there, but I'm still here. Right, I'm on the long study. Of this thing, and here's what I will tell you now.
Right.
I wasn't even trying to get people to follow me then. None of us were. We were just doing our thing. Yeah. But now that y'all all on the, you want to follow me, you're gonna hear me. Then here's what I say about it now. So this has been passed down to me, and for people that lived it. And I think if you study and you think about, without even really posing the question to some of these legends, if you think about their story as it's available, you're like, oh, it really kind of is bookended. The movement, if you want to, because I choose to look at any such thing that is so culturally foundational and culturally so attributed to cultural change, hip hop, it's like the world before and the world after, if you're gonna really think about. So we got it all packaged up and candy barred out, right? But we didn't do that with the civil rights movement.
We did not. Yep.
I'm not saying we should have. I'm just saying we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah,
Thank God, in a way,
Thank God, yeah.
Because we did enough in some ways. Right. Everybody got their JFK plate and shit. But you know what I'm saying? By the time, because by that time, that was, again, I lived through the action figure moments and the toys in the cereal time of the ad man and the marketers and everybody getting together and just well, boys, we got to just go ahead and let the dogs loose. And as far as consumerism is concerned, just beat the death out of everything that comes our way.
Yeah.
So, God forbid, the ease of the availability of the American dollar that was connected to the growth of hip-hop culture as it was coming from poor folks that were creating it, it was bound to go bust. And it was bound to happen quick. So you've asked the people that was there when the art was the art, before the fucking vampires got involved and traded it up, changed it into what they wanted our voice to be. So I don't want to have a conversation that's post. You're only going to get this deal if.
Yeah.
You can have that whole, we hip hop, you can have that conversation. I won't deny it to anybody.
Sure, yeah.
It's not the experience that, thank God, I was close enough to. And for whatever reason of my own makeup and grace, built to be able to recognize enough of what's going on around me at the time. Many were dafted to the science until after the fact.
Right.
I was caught up in the mix of a moment that, like, literally, looking back again from this perspective at an age I thought I'd never reach, especially based on the politics they were sending me when I first got here to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Because I was in that ratio of young black men wasn't supposed to make it past 25.
Yeah,
and they were selling that shit so hard that whether by vice or device, there was some shit going to happen to me.
Yeah.
You know, I in the narrow escape of being a Baltimorean, looking back, the things that are the dearest about the experience of not just ending up, you know, with my writing community, but as we mentioned, we tapped into like the difference in everything that was happening in the do-it-yourself punk community, because it was so strong and prolific at that time. Saved so many souls. Now, by nature and number of the, like, how treacherous the landscape is for young people, and there's no buffer zone out there. There's no buffer zone, especially where people get it and understand and are willing to accept once you've, you know, it's hard. Once you've taken a certain walk, you're a pariah. Society not gonna let you back into a place. And, like, you know, on the scene that we had, you know, it was like by design, practice forgiveness before you showed up a mess. Yeah. Because the likelihood that you had already been cast out by your family or your friends for some reason of your being the oddball out was why you were there in the first place. Yeah. So if a certain percentage, and again, back then it was much smaller, of guys that strayed out and really got into hard stuff or things like that, and or had to take extra care, the dudes who ran the punk rock hall, Jules, you know, a bunch of us, we've gotten together on some, like, we got to do it for Dude while, you know, this year we're trying to give him his flowers while he's here. Oh, yeah. Because last year we lost a lot of people from that era who were kind of my age group, but were just that couple of years older that made things happen. Were the movers and shakers that inherited the, like, let's make this let's protect this and grow it scene. Yeah. Guys started falling off last year, and it was a heavy one. So in looking back to the uniqueness of that community, the strengths of it, and I guess, again, as I mentioned earlier, I dare say the uniqueness, which a lot of us have recently, in getting together in the ways that we have discussed, of our time. That moment in Baltimore of youth that we had, that again, you sort of smelled that there was something precious about it, but you didn't understand how to, like, have the overview and the rear view that I have now. Right, and all of us looking back like, yo, can you believe we got away with that? And that it was literally as, like, magic as it was, because one of the other mirroring places, and you probably somewhere along the line, you've heard me speak about working in and the other mirror reality of being at Signal. Yes. And being at the nightclub and of where all the people would meet. Right? And so enough people came to the punk rock club and things like that, or working at the Inner Harbor. Yeah. But the ultimate, you know, everybody gonna be there at some point before 4 a.m. was the nightclub. Right. You know, and so I ended up working at the biggest nightclub on the Eastern Seaboard by the time, you know, I was 15 years old, and was there 2 nights a week, just sweeping the floors and mixing the punch and keeping out of the way and learning as much as I could, you know, and becoming friends with the DJs and the local drug dealers, right? And you know, just kind of living my life, like going home at 4 a.m, writing on things and having my own little urban rituals, you know, connected to this place. But it was this grand cacophony of, you know, a watering hole by design. You couldn't recreate today if you tried. You couldn't recreate it today if you tried, because of the nature of the sense of freedom and availability that all of the different economic classes and people with a desire to have a certain connection to a nightlife in the entire area had back then. I mean, it was one place by 11:30, a different place by 2,
Yep.
and certainly different by 3:34. Like
Absolutely.
it would swell with the overall. Like, there's only one place left to go, and it's the only, sunken dance floor.
Right.
The place was a vision, of extreme rarity, especially these days. Now, if you would look back on it, you'd see nothing like it except for if it was built for a movie set. It just don't exist no more.
Yeah.
And that was my comment. I got to be there in time to mix the punch. So
yeah, for sure.
Coming up in those environments, and again with like these rad bosses, like Bubbles, the guy that owned the place was this like consummately self-empowered queen that like took absolutely no shit from like anybody in the city or the cops. He was just a raucous case. And had his little henchmen and their long leather coats, and it was a fun time to to actually again catch that tail end of what this city I think did best before. Not saying that it ever, like, Baltimore is forever going to be like fertile soil for creatives.
Absolutely.
It's whether or not the powers that be are really working on your side to either for the most part, we just need y'all to stay the hell out of the way.
Just get out of the way.
Right. Back then, y'all wanna ass. Man, right? It's like, so much do-it-yourself, so much space for creatives to nurture their own communities.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, there's so many things I could say to that, but I feel like it's always going to just come back into the parts of the story. Things always just kind of reach back in terms of like lessons learned or like, just the feeling of the time for like every part of the story that I see in your life. And we'll just end up getting back there anyway. So I don't want to rush anything. I'll just let it happen organically. But we talk about creatives. And as you were talking, I was thinking about Aztec. It was one of the first people you started writing with. I think you learned all of the alleys with Aztec like together. And we even talked about
homie.
Yep.
Shout out, baby. Thank you again.
Yep. And we talked about like Jules Loft and like that just epic area that like Utah and Mulberry Street, like that was just like you mentioned. I couldn't have said it better myself. Like it's just a time that was cemented in history forever that you can't really recreate. And like that is. I think about punk, and then I think about, just like I mentioned earlier on in your story, of like skateboarding culture as we know today kind of feels very punk when we look back on it. It's kind of like rebellious, just young, youthful energy, but I do want to mention, you brought up sort of the bus, right? And for you, I think primarily skateboarding was a form of transportation for you, just to get around this landscape in addition to the bus.
It became that. When I got here, it went from being something that when I was in Florida I was into with regard to like where the riding took you, being at the park, especially because there was no park here, especially there was now, thank God, but
thank God.
no such then. Street skating was again also about to blossom. I was used to like literally riding in a big concrete park, so I had kind of a big wide board, which is what I had been accustomed to, and though street skating was about to pop again, like I watched Rodney all the time at the park, and we didn't know freestyle was about to mesh with the street. We had, it was right around the corner with everything that Nodus Copus and all the fucking majors that changed changed the game in that realm during my youth of skating here. Once, I found that. I mean, it didn't go away totally. It was, I plugged into a skate scene where what I took from the bowls in Florida became like riding ramps here. We would build quarter pipes in the neighborhood. We would go to Hell Ramp out in Miller's Island. But Graph certainly began to, as far as like the self-expression place of long since already having a strength of visual art over being an athlete in my expressionary sense. That I rode for fun. I used to always, I still kind of ride to go fast. I ride for speed, and you still don't want none, on some downhill shit. These kids who do flip tricks and shit, I was like, come on! It's like, this hill with me. They're like, nah, bro, you're nuts. You know, like, some of them, a lot of them Cali boys, they're hill bombers, but around here it's hard to find kids that are like they're burly like that.
Man.
But that's a whole different sect of like longboarders.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah, you got to get into these other people that want to go fast downhill. But when I first got here, one of the things for sure that, oddly enough, again, it was about to break enough that it helped me break in with the community. Next thing you know, it was like, oh, hey, you know, my brother's got one of those. Or skateboarding, like there was this place called Sundancer that was at the mall that, you know, there was one of when I got here. And then all of a sudden they had 3 locations because surfing and the whole thing had just kind of broken. Like it had was just popping open enough for popular culture, not just people near the beach in California and Florida. Because I had already grown up on it. You know, like when I was in Gainesville, I was totally living the fast times at Ridgemont High life.
That's right.
The whole damn way. Hanging out at the fucking arcade, eating slices of pizza. Like
the life.
Straight up Stranger Things, bro. That show came out, I was like, are they tapping my mind? Like, really did this well.
Right,
Yeah, but so the style that we attributed then versus everything that came in, you know, like there was a huge amount of redevelopment in being here. Even the transition to being, you know, when I got here the first year, Baltimore was hard as hell on me. You know, like I gotta say, and throw it out there that like that bit of time before the required pushback surfaced in me to deal with like what this city was going to inevitably be like. Yeah, this motherfucker's hard on me when I first got here.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to find a niche. Wasn't right off that I had friends who were the lifelong friends in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
First group of dudes I hit it off with or girls were, you know, there was some people I was playing spin the bottle with. But even that was like more curiosity based than it was true friendship. Like, I think I was even more than like, poke him, he's cute, you know. Like, there was a lot of like incongruencies to it being easy. It was like everything that was happening. I mean, you know, when you move a 13-year-old to an environment like this, they've never been in before, and it was a rough transition. Saw my first handgun, you know, at Herring Run School.
Kid just pulled it out. Hey, look.
In school. And, you know, like there was a normalcy to that for a lot of people that was the harder part of trying to take on some of the, like, everybody acts like the stuff that's happening to me, or that I'm like, I'll bring up. It's like, oh, that's normal, you know? Like, and so it was like kind of coming to terms with what was normal around here. And that was on a lot of things. Like it was on a lot of levels of like moving into Highlandtown and being warned early about some of the behaviorisms around Patterson Park, especially back then as a young man. Took a lot of years for that to change, but you got made aware early to like watch your P's and Q's, you know, because there was constantly guys out on the hustle looking for young boys and things like that. And so yeah, the city as an environment that was definitely a hard adjustment before it got good. Can't be, you know, untold. Sometimes I feel like that even I gloss over that time that literally, like, I thought I wasn't gonna make it. So much so to the point where like I had to boogie out. I did 1 year of school living in Reston, Virginia, because the first year here beat my ass so hard.
Really rough, yeah.
Yeah, it was so hard, you know, like I literally had to fight to be befriended. And that was, you know, like again, that was at a cost of like not who I was, but recognizing who I might have recognized, you know, a part of who you have to be to be in this place, which was cool. You know, like I came to terms with that shit, and it became a part of the willingness, especially with Graph, to be in the mix with people who helped me all the further figure out, where that line was going to be drawn with the terminality in the criminal set in Baltimore, which, as we know, is just like one of these, I don't know. You're very in the vanilla 9-to-5 world. If that shit, you weren't born into it in some way, or it doesn't end up like in your friend or family set and circle in some way here, and you're not faced or forced to come to term determination with regard to either changing you or changing relationship in your life.
And as you say that, like, I think about a concept you've talked about also, just in terms of the art of graffiti, like in sort of this concept of like the placement, like, has to kind of be a part of the environment. Like, at least especially early on when people were, doing these, these beautiful pieces, it was this desire for the placement to feel a part of the environment itself. And as you speak, it kind of feels like even in your own life, there's sort of this adjustment that has to happen of the new environment. And then whatever that placement is for you, you kind of just blend into this, and not necessarily it changing you per se, but like it's kind of whatever this relationship is between that environment and the thing that's in it, And I think that's just, it's so funny how just kind of art imitates life. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but literally it's kind of art imitates life. And, I think even nowadays, I kind of do want to stay on that topic for a little bit of kind of capturing the mystique of an area, kind of capturing the spirit of an area for these pieces we see, where no matter where you are, you go, you see a big piece, you see like a throwaway or something, just kind of like whatever. But you juxtapose that to like early on when it was really exploding, like in the city, these pieces felt like they were capturing the soul of the environment, like the neighborhoods they were in. And talk to me about sort of, are we still there? Are we still in an era? And I'm not necessarily a writer myself, so I don't want to speak on, how it feels to be in it now. But when you think about the pieces you've seen growing up, things that inspired you, and then you see things that are up now, does that spirit of living in the mystique of the area, living in the soul of the environment still live today in the art?
Well, graffiti is to me, to speak about it in any other terms than to kind of be willing to remove myself and my experience from it as I speak on it, because it's so encompassing of not just countless myriad of personality types that come into play, and behaviorisms based on those personality types that come into play with regard to what motivates an individual. But now, more certainly than ever, even underneath of the, I can speak about my little sect or the graffiti that I do, and the folks that I'm closer to, underneath this little tight, fresh brimmed hat of style writers, because we have decided, in reference to our moment, in adaptation to the thing, that's, for lack of a better way to look at it, that's the bookend that we've adhered to upholding a practitioner on. The arts in general, all of them, most of them, they sway back and forth between strict practitioner and people who are like out to, within their practice of a certain craft, bend the envelopes and like see what's possible within the realm of still calling a thing a thing. It happens across the board in like what we do as creatives. So within graffiti graffiti as it exists, has nothing to do with that little moment that we as style writers have adapted into, and that some people, laced into one of the elements of hip hop and all this romanticized blah blah blah. Okay.
Yeah.
Like graffiti as per such is a mark made by a person in public, someplace where it's not supposed to be. It can be any Tom, Dick, and Harry that you want. And so reduced down to that being the ways in which it happens, the countless happenings of it. Historically, I find some of the most the more absent nature of it now, especially in our urban environment, that used to be the most relevant and the most prolific, especially in ancient times, was informative nature in the town square of what the hell had recently gone on or what you missed yesterday by the one person who could freaking write in the whole village.
Facts, yeah. 100%.
Because it wasn't all of you, back when in 8-5, so it's been around forever. It's held many uses and devices in our public lives and so now its most recent manifestation, I think, it's got a slightly broader public perspective of definition than it had when I was young. Let's start from there. Like when I was tagging as a kid, that's what that's what are these taggers up to?
Right, yeah, exactly.
That was as far as they were willing to toss the cultural growth with it. And so it hasn't gone too far from there, but what's happened is that as a youth culture thing, as you mentioned, just with regard to that strength of energy, which, and I'll say this outright, thank God that hasn't disappeared from it altogether, nor do I think it actually can. So it's sort of beautiful about the practice.
It's in the soul of it.
I don't think that the youth-born nature of it can be taken out of it, and that's, I dare say right down to the idiots that are trying to practice it somehow with AI. It's the more because they're going to try and do that with everything.
Yep.
The more there will always until we stop making kids gonna do what kids are gonna do.
Kids are gonna kids.
So and which is again also what's beautiful about skateboarding. I draw probably the closest parallel in trying to talk about graffiti with people who don't understand the nature of what graffiti is and how it works. Not that skateboarding somehow or other be as far as how it manifests in people's ability to look at what it does, whether you skate or not.
Right,
Oh, that's very basic.
Right. Yeah.
That just brought it down to basics for me because it's kind of that way.
Exactly.
Spray paint can, skateboard. We all have the same tool.
Right.
It's what you do with that tool. It's how you, as a creative, and then it's like you said. When we get back to the thought or the thought that you brought up with regard to the adaptative nature to your architectural environment.
Sure. Yeah.
That plays into a percentage of how the art is not just done but executed, and what the final vision for yourself and for the public is based on that, and then that is put through the filter I just mentioned of all these other different.
Yeah.
What's your take on this same architectural environment as me? And one person will, wrap and hug it tight like an octopus, and another person will I'm gonna obnoxiously scrawl right across the front of every. I'm not gonna hug any of the things there that are preemptively a gesture to the mind. I'm gonna cut across them with every attempt at denying their you can run again from both ends of the spectrum with regard to how a person decides. There were people even in my comeuppance years whose belief really, even though they did some really cool, really I want to say poetic and poignant pieces of graffiti, they were hella still more out to put things where they felt like they didn't belong. And this was in an era where that was not that hard to do. And that didn't mean that you were fucking putting it every place.
Yeah, exactly.
It was still in these really kind of hidden clandestine sort of places that you still sort of had to be somebody who like desired being off the beaten path or out of the way of most folks anyway to run into. And so in my era, that was what made graph special. It wasn't down your throat.
Yeah.
It was in a place where you already felt like, man, I'm away from the general crowd anyway. And then when I got here, there was this thing.
Yeah.
There was this special commemorative thing.
Yeah.
That somebody came here to this weird, out of the way, clandestine spot and spent a lot of time doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing's ever made me feel this way. Nothing's made me feel like disconnected to what it's like to like, you know, like for those of us that got our spark, which was me, you know, I had been told I was going to be an artist for a bunch of years of my life before graph made me realize what that meant, you know, experiencing graph, longing to participate in that thing, having the feeling, growing into the strength of knowing the steps and making the moves that it took to participate culturally was, for me, that was that calling. So, that is such, if I can comment on its modern moment, it's been interesting for me to see once again how much of a modern microcosm of the world that graffiti is in its now moment. Because we have a really strong and a very present sense of, and you said this yourself, I mean, it's like they're youth, they're kids, especially kids to me, but they ain't kids like they're living in mom's basement like I was when I started. They're like, you know, sophomores in college, your average writer. Yeah. But there's this huge movement amongst kids in that age group of this thing that they call anti-style. Where the whole idea is to embrace a much more, you know, unpracticed, free-form methodology of your application that, again, as the name denotes, is like not based on a regimen or a practitioner that is repetitive, but just an action in and of itself that may be repetitive. Only in the doing and the going. The placement therein of, again, being even more random and less thought out or considerate to the environment or to the architecture, but just in this sense of like presence. To me, the youth, for those few years, that they're always going to carry on their backs a certain sentiment of resistance, resentment, change, from an old paradigm and space of, you know, whether they feel like they're forced or haven't had any choice, or like, you know, you talk to these kids in the language that they use and the presence that they have about the world that they inherited. Some of it is like kind of blatantly unknowing, and a lot of it makes a lot of fucking sense. A lot of it's dead on point. But you got to give them the amount of time to come back around through the moment of growth that's hidden inside of the kind of encasement of reactionaryism a little bit, which one is allowed. We are all, and we have become very reactionary people, especially in this country. 100%, So 100%. I see the graffiti movement right now, and most of the moment that we're having as being really just kind of keynoted into that part of the human experience that we're all having, like, and again, you know, it's like I'm not here for it. I'm about the change. However, you know, we all get around to like the acceptance of, you know, everybody having their room and right to things. A lot of the recent behaviorism stuff has been connected to, you know, like the hardheads I know that used to bomb for the sake of bombing and or still bomb like that because they came from a style writing side of like, well, I'm not for the pretty shit, you know, and burners and shit. I just like to smother. These are the type of like criminals that these new bunch aren't. I'll just say that. Like this, that's coming from the different era of like the way that some of these kids like to wreck stuff. They're not, you know, most of them, you know, and again, this is nothing against them.
Sure,
they come from a very nice guy generation of political correctness and shit.
Facts, yeah.
And end up doing a lot of damage that only used to be concurred by motherfuckers you didn't want to cross paths with, you know?
Seriously,
and or question their methodologies or modes in any way, shape, or form because they were going to make sure it got worse.
Right?
Like, don't tell him to not do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
So, but, you know,
Well
like
said.
these days, I think we're kind of in a come around from things being trendy in a direction of the look at me. It's just having a time where the look at me is much more important than the look at me for this. It's just the look at me. You know, it's not even about like look at me for this anymore. It's just. People just stop right at the look at me.
Yeah, that's it. That's the period at the end of the sentence. Yeah.
And hey,
yeah, right.
You have my attention.
Now what? Oh man, that's a bar.
Crazy.
You sure you don't rap?
I could have. Right.
That is a bar. No, I mean, and that's so funny you mentioned that. I mean, there is such an interesting like relationship between like now and sort of before. Like I'm always in this entire time I've kind of just been juxtaposing these two times of like, you know, a lot of these guys didn't really come up in anything, really have no connection to sort of that street part of what the street art is. You know, like they have no real connection whatsoever to it. And I think even at that time, and I think you've yourself said this in a different talk that I've seen, that you know, there's this connotation of what street art is per se, and you know, I think you've done a great job in redefining what that relationship between the street and the art in the street art is. And a lot of times, I think a lot of people think of street art as sort of this, you know, this illicit act that like predicates crime and like you have to be in the streets and you got to do all these things, and a lot of times there is this tension between like the art itself and in a lot of ways doesn't have to do anything with quote unquote the streets, but just by the nature of, you know, the craft itself, it kind of pulls you in the things that are kind of inherent to the streets, but it's not necessarily you are in it. And I think, you know, there's this push and pull, you know, and talk to us about sort of how you view sort of the term street art, especially in the way that, you know, people kind of just give it this negative connotation. Like, how do you think about that phrase?
I mean, it only felt negative to me because of, I guess it feels and it felt when that terminology all of a sudden kind of popped up. Yeah. You know, it feels like it's been forever ago now.
It has predicated,
but I do feeling, remember it. Yeah. Right, I remember it was like, oh yeah, we didn't always call any of this shit that.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
Just kind of got hit by that bus when it came up the street. It feels packaged. It feels like, and what's weird is like, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but it didn't feel like at the time that was really the art world really making that move as much as a generality of the world. Sure. Maybe it was the art world. I don't know. You know, I'm not connected to that even enough to know. But somebody nailed it down and got it straight for there to be this like, hey guys, we need a gray zone that's like, you know, where we can pack them in because we can save 8 out of 75 graffiti writers, but not all. There's room for them all on board, and you know they drink too goddamn much. These muralists, and they're much kinder.
Yeah.
Gentler. So, I feel like it's basically a packaging deal. To me, you know, where does it end? Where does it stop? Street art. Most of the art, even again, before I realized that graffiti art was my shining like inspiration of like, this is what I gotta be, or I have no choice but to be.
Yeah.
You know, when I rode my skateboard for years before that, as a, you know, with heart, that was street art.
Yeah.
There ain't no street. There's no art street arter than skateboarding.
Facts.
And fuck what you call it.
It's literally art.
Say what you do, you know, and if you do it, you've known, then come on with it.
Yeah.
And especially again at that era, the art that went along with it.
Yeah. Hand in
You
hand.
know, like
hand
the,
in hand.
the art that came from the surfing edge that then bled into like, you know, the Dogtown story of like everything that like was everything when it wasn't much to it.
Right, yeah.
There's only a few of us that do it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did you get that thing he did? Like, yeah, you know, like, telling you, bro, like being connected that far back to before the thing went pop, no matter what it was, tattooing, skateboarding, graffiti, knowing the OGs for real and the responsible parties for all the shit, having a dialogue with the people who are like, oh yeah, I invented that shit.
Right. Right.
That thing everybody does, I invented it, bro.
Yeah, I started that.
That's the thing everybody stole. I drew it.
Yeah.
Right here in this house.
Literally.
Where we're talking. So, yeah, you know, like sometimes you get that insight to like what I like to call it is like these references to the true stillness of time, right? Because it does so much. You know, we've learned to do so little with it.
Yeah.
But that's one of those places that time freezes, time stops, and stills out around cultural change like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, takes us back to those like that hip hop blockade.
Yeah.
You can't tell me this time we're in right now with this like flippity flop, weirded out, watered down, ass hanging hip hop thing that's happening is not the same empowerment to like cultural diffusion that happened during its initiates.
Yeah.
You know, the resistance, the raw soil required for the ingenuity.
Hell yeah.
That all the things you want to include took. Even go ahead and throw graffiti in, even which is like most of the time I don't allow or get into that argument, and they're gonna like I'll stay over here on that on some whatever. Yeah. But some of my folks allow for it, and I'll allow for because the urban dialogue I experienced and that I know was especially experienced in Philadelphia and New York City, in juxtaposition here, but in its real birthplace. Yeah. When the guys stopped fighting and started partying, you know, which was again, it was so much more political than the marketing that we now know hip hop to be will allow for, which is my biggest gripe for it. Yes. You know, like they took the people out of hip hop and put in nothing but the price tags and marketing. Amen. And the bullshit, you know, but the thing that graced us with it in the first place was the politics of getting us in a neighborhood to stop knifing each other over turf, you know, and come together over our similarities. And next thing you know, the only gripe and the only beef we had was between styles. Right. One of these views like, you know, like, yo, your shit is whack, bro. Like, you know, and you know. Yeah. And then 2 decades later, you'd be in the pharmacy behind a white man, and he'd be like, well, that's whack. My prescription's not ready. Man. I didn't hear that. Are you on the platform judging styles? What is going, you know? But yeah, hip hop is omnipresent, man. The language of graffiti writing is everywhere. Most of the shit that was original hip hop slang was graffiti writer slang.
Graffiti writer slang. That's
I'm gonna say that here.
Thank you for saying that.
Tell me I'm wrong. Back them facts up. Another fresh documentary for you if you've never seen it. That gives you some really cool insight to that is a movie called Elevated Platform Stations of the Elevated.
Stations of the
Elevated.
I'm on it.
It's a you'll love it. Yeah. You'll love it. Like I'm gonna just say that Stations of the Elevated. It's like this really jazzy vignette of early subway cars and elevated track systems taken in New York in combination with hand-painted billboards of that era, some of which go back to like when they were they were machined billboards where they had something that moved.
Yeah, yeah,
Or they would puff
yeah.
smoke or some
Yeah,
shit like
yeah.
that. And so it's this sick combination of like marketing and advertisement with early graffiti that this videographer took, this filmographer took, and it's amazing. And during the graffiti part, one of the things he did for the thing was there's a part where he's talking to just kids, or you're seeing trains, but you're hearing the kids on the platform talk about trains. And the language, and it's all kids.
It's all kids, yes.
It's youngsters. You can tell in the voice that they ain't even hit puberty yet, you know. And but the language they use is all early hip hop vernacular that you know from fucking rap music. Like all kind of words and shit.
Wait to
it's
watch
like
that.
it's the best.
I cannot wait to watch that, man.
Wait a second. I heard that it was from some gangster.
Right, it is.
It is some child,
It's
like
some kid.
and they're using still some like like they got feeling and emotion behind it, but it's kids talking, it's so good.
Oh man, I can't wait to watch that. Yeah, that's on my list. I am locked in after this. I'm gonna literally be up till 5 a.m. But I do want to mention, like, it's like it's so many things around this time, and I did, kind of gloss over a few things. Like we talked about like high school a little bit, but I didn't bring up like GSI. Like I didn't bring up Ghetto Strollers Incorporated. I think at that time, they were like in the 11th grade when you were in the 9th grade, when you first kind of encountered them.
Those boys were my elder in that sense.
Yeah.
We all looked up to them, or the bunch of us that I was on the east side with, or Az and I were, we're 9th grade. They're 11th, and only got 1 year before they're in the real world. So we watched them make that transition. Of course, by the time they did, I was already quitting school too. Right. But yeah, those dudes were, because they were such great guys. They became not just sort of our elder statesmen at that moment. They were fucking talented, fucking banging writers, omnipresent on the west side of town. But again, we were having this moment in Baltimore where you were still really learning hand in hand from the behaviorisms and the advice and the gestures from that generation, that next generation up. So like at that time, those dudes like being and even wanting to pay us any money. Like if you had attention from dudes, that was like, yo, he pays you any mind at all? Like, rah, like it was still like that. If you had that from dudes who, and they were super cool. Yeah. They were both like in their own mind, like True and Zeke were some strutting dudes. Like they were strollers, they were well known, and had girls, and like that. So they were to be admired in how they were carrying themselves, and so it made it easy to to herald them by example. As you also then didn't have to, like, there were people that you kind of wanted to feel like the leader around, and then ones you didn't want to. Like, I have to have that responsibility now. You're here.
Right.
Older dudes in the room.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure.
I don't have to wear the hat.
I'm glad you brought their names up too. Like, I think one of the things that for someone like me who just like appreciates the art, like I could be someone completely random. I could be a guy who just happens to pass a piece on the top of a building somewhere. But like for a lot of the people that are like that, and even up until the people who like have the high reverence like myself for like how difficult the craft is and how like beautiful it is at a high level, I think so often people who like maybe watch my show, or like people who are just kind of casual, normal people, don't really get to hear the names of those who are revered as like these legends and like these people who like really, really put on for the space, like earlier, but like like without a lot of overhead, like people they looked up to. They was like, these are pioneers of their time. Whether or not they were called that is like,
it's hard without doing the digging. I mean, and again, it's like the information is so not readily available, and you have to really want to seek it out, soak it up to get back to those facts. But with regard to GSI's status, omnipresence at that time, for sure, they were and they were the gold standard for sure.
Yeah.
And some of the, some of the East Coast's earliest missionaries too. Plaid, that started the crew, he spent a lot of time in Atlanta, and so he, not necessarily maybe by Atlanta's accord of like who were the first people that kind of brought writing there or whatever, but he did put some stuff up down there. Like he had pieces up around the same time as Save and some of the first original OGs from Atlanta, just from going down there for school. True also definitely denoted as one of the first people to go down to Richmond and ever put up when he was there for school. So they did a little traveling and put the strollers on the map too early, before, again, there was any, pre-internet, crazy way before internet and any other form really of like magazine, 90s wave communication.
Right,
Yeah,
and I mean, I try to use this platform to like really bring people who were there and people who really understand the gravity of the things that were happening, no matter what medium it is, but in particularly in this space. I know, you're a wealth of knowledge, so I just thank you for, just sharing a lot of these names, because I think it is important to keep these stories going, and I think it's super important to know where you came from, especially for like a young graffiti writer watching this, 12, 13 or whatever. You would want to know who set the stage for you to be here. And I would love to be the person to give you that story so that, it can really inspire you in a different way. And I mean, we talk about crews. Shout out to Mobtown Crew, where you really first got your start. And I think your first piece was in a tunnel, like under the University Avenue Bridge near Wymondley. And, I think that, just being in that, we talked about that area and like the time and like all the things that are kind of aligning perfectly for this era to birth, and you're right in it. Talk about Mobtown Crew and like talk about some of the things that really drew you there first.
Well, those guys were they were the heart of the guys that were at the punk rock club that had inherited the movement from Revolt. And
shout out to Revolt. Huge shout out to Revolt.
Yeah, he himself, wasn't ever really a part of that scene, and I think was already out of town by the time that the Loft, as I discovered it, had developed. Graffiti soaked and becoming a burgeoning punk rock club, but he had gone home by then, and these were the handful of guys that had sort of just picked up on what he was laying down around town. They drank at the Mount Royal Tavern also, or Club Chuck, and so they had a moment or two here or there with him. I think at that time, especially Cuba was probably the only guy that crossed over. Yeah.
Legend.
Big up to my brother. Yeah. Always and forever. He, as he did, like he lived in lots of worlds, and so being at the punk club and also being into the Dead and being into hippie rock and stuff and things that Danny Revolt was into, it was like really it was natural that he was the go-between between these guys who I don't think actually had that much in common with Revolt. Like I got to know him much better after the fact, many years later, and he was not a punker. Fair. God bless you, Danny. Like you can hang out at the show in the back of the room, but you're not in the pit. You know that. Take no offense to me saying that.
Sure, yeah.
But no, the Mobtown Crew were the young dudes who were kind of at the helm of the punk scene for real. And some of those guys, and inherently their art was much punker. The exposure there, I think, is the real difference between having had an early dose of the comeuppance in Baltimore that was really different from most graffiti writers, at least in my age group or generations after, that I've gotten to know, because where the scenes may have been happening similarly, and there were a lot of people on the early, like late 80s, early 90s hardcore scene in New York that wrote. Jersey also. A lot. Our scene was the Baltimore DC. Well, I want to say Baltimore DC because the unity was so strong and the similarity was so strong. Was much different than NYC hardcore scene. The hardcore scene in New York is even different than like what some people would call the punk scene. Like there's definitive lines between like where styles of music, even at the moment that they were kind of happening, between what was punk and what was hardcore, and especially those things were completely defined by the late 80s into the 90s, and there were many more writers in the hardcore scene than what developed into the much more like kind of the punk scene south of New York City. So the way I learned and the people that I learned things from had an attitude that went on into like a lot of the energy that I got out of it was where these guys went with becoming prevalent in tattooing. The connection wasn't what it became, but again, tattooing at that time was still this sort of like super clandestine, only sought out, by the few, kind of thing. And a couple of the guys who had this very like spookier than now kind of style to what they were doing with their graffiti, not at all b-boy pose,
right? Exactly.
Not at all. Like a clown being scared by a bat, like kind of opposite end of the spectrum sort of visuals. So yeah, a couple of those guys went on to like really make names for themselves in the tattooing thing, and so the imagery, the attitude, and everything that came with the Mobtown crew was this whole much more viscerally aggressive style than hip hop edged, or then again most of the post subway art stuff that people were considering graffiti. The graffiti I was used to had, devil's horns and like weird cows and eyeballs and things. Had its vein.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I have to, huge shout out to Cuba. Like, rest in peace, Cuba. I have to give that name a few more seconds. Only because, one, we mentioned Revolt. Like, he, if we're talking about this 79, 80 kind of era, he's like his right-hand man and ends up becoming, like, really great friends with you. But after, like, I think a year after you got to Baltimore, he ended up moving to the Bay Area.
Yeah, we didn't really get to know each other before he left. We met briefly, super briefly, but he and Revolt parted ways after their couple of years of like really sort of being tight bombing partners, and Revolt being a huge influence on Cuba with regard to not just but he like his style derivative and how he wrote and things and the way he drew with his letter formations and stuff, but his kind of literally sort of missionary attitude about graffiti and like what he was out to do with it. And now that did come more personally from who Clarence was. Like that was him inside. Like he was that person. Revolt wasn't here on any mission. He was here to get his BFA, and he met a couple of friends and was just doing his thing. He left and really did not realize that he had set off any scene in his wake. He didn't realize that until he met me. Until I was one of the first writers he met that was ever like, do you realize what you did? I have your tattoo, your arm. You're the man. So it's odd how again. In many ways, in many different fractured points of my own history with it, I can look back on the levels of innocence and purity in the form, even after and within. You know, like he's here getting his BFA, like thinking, like deciding, well, I guess I'll go to college. You know, this place is affordable. It's not too far from home. You know, he's not thinking, I'll continue furthering the world history of like how this culture unfolds.
Yeah.
You know, you're not thinking that.
We have no.
But the culture is unfolding. You know, like, So I'm pretty proud about that whole family tree and the trickle down and the stuff that like all of again like just sort of accidentally falls together. So those two meeting and the special nature of their relationship. You know, I play it through my mind a lot because I know them both and I got to know them both well, but didn't ever. I got to spend a little time with them together, not much. Of course, this is many years later. You know, years on into Cuba becoming much more frail, you know, due to his health, and than he was in those years, I'm sure. When he was strapping and you know, like picking up all the chicks and having all the good info, you know, it's a whole different hang then for the boys. But you know them and you know that what it was like, and so they were quite a pair, I'm sure, and the unique nature of their, you know, like him, Cuba becoming who he was meant to be for the Bay Area, leaving here with the, you know, fistful of influence and the gumption to lay it down out there, but never also again like never really so much as like turning over a stone as to like what happened to Revolt. You know, revering him on high, you know, like, oh, that's my man. He taught me everything I know, but he's on the other side of the country, and I don't know, you know, like, it is what it is. You know? It's such an odd thing, you know. It's like, there's people, and it's like, that's kind of him on a way, on a level, and it's like, oh, I think the highest of him. I've never thought to drop him a line. Not even once, you know, like. So it was funny when I, you know, ended up digging him up myself years later on some like shit with my man Vespa, who was another one of my partners here.
Shout out to Vespa.
And we're like, you know, we gotta find Cuba, and we dig him up in San Francisco, like on a straight cold call, and you know, like, you're not gonna remember who we are, but we're coming to get you. Like, what do you want to have for dinner? You know, and he wasn't sure who we were. God bless him that he even said yes, because we could have been kidnapping his ass. You know, like, my friends have been shanghaied out here. I know what the fuck is up. So, but we pull up and he's like, it's you guys, you know, and he has, for the life of him, my God, you know, and I don't know if you've ever met anybody like this, but he's one of those people that has a fucking photographic memory.
Only one person I've ever met that way.
Cuba did a lot of LSD when it was really good.
Happens.
I mean, when it was really good, he did a lot of good shit. Smoked more reefer than, you know, and has suffered more ill, you know, in different health diagnoses and things. You know, has literally lived longer than he should have, than he was diagnosed to live. Outdid any doctor's, you know, thoughts on his longevity. Yeah. To the point where he couldn't speak anymore. He could still tell you what you were wearing or what song was playing on an afternoon, and it was amazing, his recall. Wow. His recall was, you know, it was just mind blowing. So, yeah, when he first saw us again and we met up with him, really, really big, like, round robin into the spiral of reconnecting and stitching him into the inevitable strength of the now moment that Graffiti was starting to have. Wasn't quite having it yet, but was about to, with my homie Roger moving to the helm of like becoming the documentarian extraordinaire of graffiti culture, and us really beginning to come of age to celebrate all the heroes of the thing, really starting to become these gray wizards in their different realms of creative expertise, and there being enough of us to get together and really herald the culture for real. And we were able to do that in time to stitch Cuba and revolt back up, you know, and sort of tell the tale and spread it out a little bit. Because so even inside the culture, so few people knew of this important nature of the family tree, you know, and how it would not be what it is without these certain meetings. You know, people in the Bay Area who wouldn't have existed without Cuba, who would not have existed without that moment with revolt. And so, yeah, we've made a lot of great sense of that. Again, that, you know, those points in the story that really are like, oh, that chapter's closed.
Yeah.
You can move on from here, but it ain't just, you know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's what happened from here, you know. Like, you can't, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned, you know, just like those guys. I mean, shout out to Rolling Thunder Writers, of course. I mean, you know, RTW, that's, you know, Revolt was a part of RTW.
Always, rock the world.
You know, rock the world. And I want to bring up another name, which is Dillinger, who actually played a big hands-on part with you, like in, you know, just as a writer. And like, can you recall like some of these moments that like impacted your style and even your, like, just how you even took what the craft was at that time? Because everything I feel like is learning lessons. Like you learn from someone who is like great at what they do, and like this in many ways can change how your viewpoint or perspective is on the craft. Like, how did that influence you at the time, just being with him? And, you know,
I think the thing that was that ended up the most special with me and Dill was at the time in his life, you know, not completely counter to some of the other guys on the scene, but like they, you know, it's like a punk scene where some of the kids were like, it was kind of, there was it was aggro. There was a youth, you know, kind of element to it that was like, to some degree, when the 13-year-older showed up, the older kids were not always thrilled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was the younger cat, poking around, skipping school, showing up with my stolen pens, trying to, you know, like, and more often than not, some of the time, Chris was already beyond an attitude of like getting pissed about it and was be more relaxed into an available conversation. So we formed a friendship that was different than, you know, I had friendships with these other guys who were like available when they were available.
Sure.
And Chris had decided, you know, like, this guy's actually kind of really cool and totally harmless, so I'm going to be available. So he, you know, we would have moments that were just more about like, again, like having, like I said, learning shit from older people. Walking up to Lexington Market and getting a sub with a dude who was not your dad or not your brother or your uncle or whatever, but just not a human being who's older than you and who you were learning shit from, or like watching the world through their eyes and hearing about their experience and shit. So we had that kind of friendship that was very different. And then allotted for there being some creative, I think, overlay that was always just kind of me like, paying attention to the other guys, like kind of like a puppy dog style versus really interfacing with Chris over stuff. He would let me sit with his sketchbook and like study his shit. He also turned me on to reggae. Like really was very into reggae. That's where he took his name from, was from the reggae artist Dillinger. Yeah. So he was always listening to good reggae, a lot of dub. And so he was my first connection early on to like that good. That was where I actually first heard the terminology "rock the world," was through listening to a vinyl copy of Reggae Sunsplash for him, you know, and at Jules's because he lived there. But Chris was he was a really just available guy. That alone pushed the strength of his influence. Just the kindness, you know, the kindness alone was kind of like, that's my. Back in the day, Dill was my dude. You know, he could do no wrong by me.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's, you know, me as being like a nerd in this space. Like I love just hearing the stories, love hearing the names, because like again, I think, you know, I try to do a lot of things with this platform. Like I try to tell a lot of stories. I try to like go as far back as I can to really try to replay, or I'll put it this way, put together the jigsaw puzzle that are the individual moments in people's lives. And I try to give them, context to the viewer for them to receive it in the way that, like, they can appreciate it in the way that the person sitting in front of me can, And I am just those little tidbits of information are just like gold to me. I'm going to literally stay up at night thinking about these things. And she knows. But, that like this is, I super, super thank you again for even just sitting down, even spending time. And I wish I could ask you like 1,000 more questions, but I know we don't have time for that. But I'll sort of bring it kind of closer up until today because, you have done a lot of things as of late. I mean, you've done things pretty much the entire time, and I wish I could detail every single thing that you've done. But there are a couple of things that I did want to mention, particularly, shout out to you. I think it was 2021, you did the Oreo Park mural. Which was like a beautiful. If you haven't seen it, like the Orioles put it up, so you can like go and watch it yourself. But this was like a sort of a beautiful ode to like the relationship between like street art as we know it now today, sort of graffiti art, and like just Camden Yards in general. Like them, like there's this, and you talk about it so well about like sort of this community being the thing that binds the two. Like the community is really what really brings these two concepts together. It's like the graffiti, but it's also like the family aspect of coming to the ball game. Like everybody in Baltimore know like that feeling of going to Camden Yards, but also seeing something beautiful. It's like this beautiful relationship between those two things. And shout out to you because I don't really know. Other than Kid Balloon, shout out to Kid Balloon. I briefly talked to him. I definitely want to have a long form conversation with him about that too. But that to me was like feels like rare air of like being able to really show and sort of this graffiti art culture that Baltimore has at Camden Yards, because they don't typically do stuff like that, which I was happy to just see. So like, can you detail at least your thoughts behind it, and the inspiration that you did when you put the piece together?
Sure. Well, it was my homie Gaia. Shout to him that brought me in on that project, and I think he still, maintains the same sort of position for them curatorially, where he's, sort of the go-to guy for handpicking, at least the local artists that have participated, and then I guess the placement and all the architectural wherefores and stuff like that. I don't know how much he's had to do with that or whatever, but I know that he's had a hand in bringing folks in, and he certainly brought me in to that occasion. And it was fun it was good across the board, because it was interesting from the time that we got into such a corporate environment to doing something like that at all, because even just a community mural can be hectic enough with some stuff, but we're talking about like every agency that had to be like on the checklist in the initial walkthrough was like 15 people. It was fun though. It was like really cool because we all showed up to talk about what their initial thoughts were right before I even touched on anything. And this is usually where like I have the most fun with people, like not pulling no punches.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I had like all 15 of like the board out there, like nervous, like what are we getting into? And so at the time, right, and so by the place that they put it, it is kind of in this 2-walled section that you're walking through, right? And the original motivation was exactly that, was that they wanted their own graffiti alley. Right? So exactly. That was where I guess Gaia had overheard somebody in the office thinking, we want a graffiti alley. And he knows, like I know, that they didn't want no graffiti alley. They didn't want a graffiti alley.
Like, for real.
Last thing you need is that type of mayhem at the stadium. So he was like, well, let me bring in this dude and we'll have a conversation with him. And I think, he'll let you know what it is you really need. Yeah. And of course, that was my real fun with it, was like doing the round robin with all these folks as to like, well, what is it you think you need? Right? Like, what do you think Graffiti Alley does? Have any of y'all even been up there recently? Because I haven't, and I can guarantee you it's a fucking mess. I don't even be going up there no more. Like, none of us do. Like, what are you thinking?
I actually have no video of you doing a piece in Graffiti Alley.
It's wild though to like show up at a thing and completely throw it out there, like where it's like, y'all don't want to do this, and they're like, so what are we doing here? Like, we came here for this dude to tell us this is a bad idea.
Is bad? I think he knows what he's talking about.
So there's like reel them on and then bring them back, like so.
Yeah.
But right in front of a guy who had plenty of experience, and I love the way he was talking, like he was head of maintenance or some shit like that, and I could tell by his build he'd gone through some graffiti shit before. He was like, if we make it obvious that you can write on anything in here, they're gonna be writing on everything. He knew it. It would just go crazy, just like Graffiti Alley. And I said, like he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so what you guys want and what you need is to let me design for you some graffiti for this space.
Yes.
But something that is, just a serious nod to my art form, combined with some extremely sensible and reasonable selfie stations.
Yeah, exactly.
For the game ticket buying public.
You're right.
and there'll be no Graffiti Alley to it. Trust you me, we are not going in that direction.
We're not doing that.
And right down to the time that I came through, because I gave them some sort of loose directional drawings that really did not zero in the way that I did once I showed up on what I was doing. And they were still very aloof, and they're like, oh my God, what's this really going to be like?
Yeah.
Then once it got rolling, and especially with the wall that just says the take me out to the ball game part with the popcorn characters and stuff. They were ecstatic. They were like, oh, this is what you meant. It's better than we could have envisioned. I was like, I knew you'd love it. I can land this shit on a dime.
Literally.
I know what the people like. They love graffiti.
Exactly.
So at that time, what's interesting, it's like we're to the point with regard to its aging up in there that I'm hoping that this will be the season that at least we can return to the dialogue, the prospect, because I tried to sell them on the idea that much like Graffiti Alley or if what they wanted to do was to really embrace culturally what we do with our art, that we'd let that ride a few seasons and then we would redo it.
Yeah.
At least the graffiti wall.
Right.
Because again, it's serving its purpose, but it's also served its purpose with regard to like what pieces do. Like we get tired of looking at some shit like that wall ain't transitioned yet. Like it's time for it to go. Like that. It's hard for normal folk to embrace that's a part of what we celebrate about our culture too, is that it's kind of transient.
Yeah.
Unless you build something out and put it in a place where it's like, well, they're not getting rid of that.
Yeah.
Then if it's in a place where it should have a lifespan, it does have a lifespan.
Right,
and we accept that and back it, like if we repeat our own stuff. It's not meant for forever. That letting it go, nature is healthy. It's healthy. see something through, and like that was last year, bro.
Right. And the 25.
So we'll see. I hope that we can get them to not be precious about it. Recognize that plenty of people have taken a little picture with it, and this, that, and the other. The next one will be as big and bright and better, or different, whatever. So we'll see. But that was a lot of fun. That was crazy fun working in that environment. I had some fun, like. Being there alone at night was a great environment working in. You don't get the occasion to feel a place like that that's usually very loud and very filled with people. When you're invited in there, for it to be still and quiet is real special, So I would bring bottles of wine up there and sit and hang late till the sun went down with my security pass and enjoy myself and ride my skateboard around. It was a good trip. And
that's fire.
Back in the day when I was living in the Funhouse crew with the boys over on the west side here, when we first found out that they were going to break ground on that stadium, we went down, a friend of mine and I, from the house and stole the street sign from what was like a 2-block long street just off of the yards right there. That actually happened to be the street where the warehouse was at the time, where they made all the street signs in Baltimore City. At least the green ones that were the street sign names. They had a specific warehouse downtown where they would make those because they were like this dipped, and they had a process to those specifically, and they made most of them at this place. So I went down to that very 2-block long street, which was Hauser Street, and we had all kind of method and means back then of like weaseling up poles and stealing street signs because that was our usual. Back when I was in high school, if you had the hots for a girl and you didn't like steal her last name or her name as a street sign, like you were lame. Like you had to really
what are you doing?
You're like, did you prove your love? What? You didn't go through the phone book and find out where her street sign is and go gank that bad boy? Like, leave it on her steps? Like, that's how you're like, no, but you'll do anything.
Right.
Yeah. So we went out and we got Hauser Street well before the construction of the stadium started. And of course, to this day, I have that sign.
Really?
And it's fucking center field. Like, that's where the pitcher's mound of Camden Yards is like where Hauser Street was. So when they invited me down to do the painting and stuff, I'm telling this story to the boys in the office, one day I show up with the sign and they're like, we think this is okay, but
right, yeah.
The street's not here anymore.
What? You don't need this.
Broke the law a long time ago. It's irrelevant.
Right. No, that's priceless, man. That street sign.
Yeah.
I don't even know how. That has to be priceless at this point. That's moment in history.
I think it's one of those things that, again, unless you're like a true historian of Baltimore lore. Now that the yards are what they were, would have to have been, and they were, like it was a active shipping area for much longer than it's been a baseball zone.
Yeah.
So you would think, to some people, I'm sure the history is relevant, but by George, I mean, I swear, I remember the street was only a 2-block long street. Yeah. So it didn't have some huge eastward or westward extension. Right. It was just right downtown.
Yeah.
So it was not a street that many people would have known of.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I was in the Funhouse crew. I didn't know of the street until I went to. They're gonna build a stadium there, so we got to go get the street sign that's in the middle of the. And lo and behold, it's Hauser Street. So I didn't even know that until the day I went to get it myself. So.
Wow, man, what a story! No, for sure. There's a lot of Baltimore lore in this episode, and I'm so happy. I'm ecstatic. It's perfect.
I do come packed with it, baby.
No, I love that. I love that. I wish we had 17 more hours to just talk. If you had time, of course. I wouldn't leave you here. But I do want to, as we kind of wrap up, because I'm running out of tape. I would like to ask about, one of the things that you are actively doing now, and you kind of picked up a little while ago, but that really interests me, that was piqued my interest in terms of your artistry that isn't just graffiti. You're also an avid collector of things, and that sort of bleeds into your creative process as collecting. And there was a few things I seen about you collecting, like different like types of bags for paintings, but they wouldn't have paint in them, or like different pieces of paper that were literally in the street that kind of influenced street art itself, like McDonald's bags, or like Trident wrappers, or like rubbings on like manhole covers and stuff like that. Like, I think that also sort of just like, man, like you really are embodying like what that true nature of what street art is. Like it's real, it's truly street art, and I'm interested in, if we could kind of make the answer a little bit shorter. I know it's hard to do that, and I'm sorry to pigeonhole you into a box, but
it's all good.
If we could talk about that, and just sort of your avid collection that you are gaining every day. Can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, we prefaced it real well with the street sign story, because that's kind of been how it works. I've been dragging it home for a long time, depending on what it is or how out of place or out of fashion that a thing with regard to its physicality or its energy, its presence might be, for a long time. Long time. That's one of the things that started in Gainesville, actually, or maybe before, but definitely became very prominent when I was living in Florida, both on the level of just my proximity to. I mean, then it wasn't the urban street, but I was constantly out. I was constantly out. I was constantly out on my bike and in the street and doing things. I spent a lot of time in a junkyard that we would hang out in Gainesville. There was a huge junkyard, massive, the likes of which you see in a movie where the cars are piled up real high and stuff. And so collecting and dealing with stuff like that is I've been doing it since back then. I think the influence of, as we said, the packaging that came along with street art makes a packaging sort of a sense with regard to the reflection of my own life's experience, in the sense that most of my inspiration, most of my life has come from I think the environment that, to me, it's just been the general public. To me, it's been my public exposure in the street.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, again, as we said, skateboarding and or the art therein, tied to and connected to the act of or the marketing of skateboarding. Listening to punk rock music and coming up on music that was connected to a really 2/4 bass, gritty foundation of urban existence is street art.
Yeah.
The flyers and the drawings that went along for the marketing and the promoting of those shows were on the street, and that's where we admired them or took them and saved them and collected them, and so there's always been this thing. There's always been the motivation to just kind of exist and or especially to reflect and to create because of the street or the community they're in. So my art, I think, has always done that inherently. I started painting on street signs and things like found saw blades really early on. Some of my first real, I guess I want to say endeavors post long term, not really doing anything creatively, but just doing graffiti. Some of my first real long endeavors into fine art at all were reverse technique on glass, on found row home windows, which, much like graffiti, though I didn't know this at the time, is also one of the rare but truly American-born art forms. Reverse technique on glass was started here in this country. And so, inherently, accidentally, again, just through nature of doing what I do, I started picking that up, and so, I consider myself an American folk artist in that sense of just doing things that have found me as much as I have found them, and that feel, like I said, connected to not just the experience I'm having, but the extension of myself into that experience. I love not paying for art supplies in the way that I love making art in a place that art is not supposed to be. Those two are this huge parallel of a systematic teeter-totter, that when I make art in the studio that's of detritus I've collected off the street, I feel hella better than if I had gone to Utrecht and paid out the nose for a bunch of supplies that then the world at our feet, or the experience that we are all having, usually is plenty to then also turn back into being and making and doing. It's just about having the eye or the wherewithal. My most recent and I guess I would dare say most successful movement into doing exactly that with work in collage, with all of the found art, found paper for the art, but it was really sort of it was a personal kind of an inside tongue-in-cheek joke. It was a joke about street art,
Yeah.
It started that way around just having to succumb, I guess, feeling like that was ultimately like well, I'm jammed if I do and I'm jammed if I don't. Like, I'm not really even in this fine art world, but as a graffiti writer, I've already been hit by the street art bus. It's like I'm in, you're a graffiti writer? That's like street art, right? So now I'm just like kind of putting up with it around my neck anyway. So in the fine art realm, I just started thinking, okay, this is what they want, huh? I got street art for them.
I got you.
And that was when I dug down deep in the well and was, came with some of the first waves of stuff that most literally. And I guess, this was probably the stuff that, I don't know if you've seen, but I have done a couple of shows based on especially the stuff that was the bags of concrete that's used by our Department of Public Works here. That they have since changed their practices. I don't know if it was the popularity of my work. I like to think that a few sales later in the right community, and they were like, "You guys got to stop throwing those bags on the street." It's hard to find those things anymore, like it used to be. But left and right, when they were making like water main repairs, they would leave this really particular bag of emptied asphaltum out on the street that I chose to use for my work.
100%. And I mean, it's so funny. I wanted to spend at least like 20 minutes just talking about that, but we're running out of time.
One could go on. It's definitely a rabbit hole.
But absolutely, man. First of all, Adam Stab is here, man. I am ecstatic to have had you.
Thanks for having me, man.
Sitting here and just recounting all these moments, and this has been a pleasure. This has been a joy for me. I'm on cloud nine. I swear I'm going home and watching all of those documentaries you mentioned, and I will have notes for you. I mean, if possible, if you're up for it, I would love to sit down again and talk about some other things we didn't get to, and just really dig deep into those things. And I'll bring more tape next time.
Christ, this was just talking about me. We haven't even begun to talk about the world,
Exactly, and that's where
I feel selfish.
Yeah, but that's what this show is about. And I super appreciate you coming here. Before you leave, I want to leave you with a short sacred Baltimore proverb, and that is, keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely.
I don't choose to matter, so.
My God. Adam Stab is here, man. Once again, it's your boy Mike on the mic from the Vibe Perspective Podcast. Tap down my guys at Ground 3 Radio. DJ OK, man, calling at 443-377-1872. Again, the number is 443-377-1872. Leave a message about Adam Stab, one of your favorite pieces of his, one of the talks he's given, collaborations he's done, or anything in between, man. Next interview coming up soon. Keep the vibe locked and loaded from Vibe Studios and Ground 3. Let's keep the vibe alive, man. Peace. We out of here.
I don't usually do these podcast type of things, and I wouldn't otherwise have done one, but Mike and I have been trying to get this together for some amount of time, and depending on your response and positivity, maybe we'll do it again for you.
Yes, sir!